right, welcome back to the first edition of Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you on the Sports Leader. And our first guest in the history of Niners Nightly is my good friend Cam Inman, author of 49ers, a curated history of the faithful, one of the best beat writers and writers around the 49ers, I think, in the entire market. Does an incredible job for the San Jose Mercury News, and he has a fantastic book. I've only gotten about 7 or 8 chapters into it, but I love it. Absolutely love it. And he's with us on the UMA guest line, I believe, to chop it up and talk 49er football. Cam, how are you?
I'm honored to be christening your show as your first guest. I'm great. Thanks. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. And I've been reading the book, and then I put it on the table. And I said, I looked up. I'm like, "Where's Cam's book?" My son's got it. He's upstairs reading it.
Great.
No, seriously, I love the way you kind of did this book. And well, first of all, before we talk about it, I mean, the foreword is written by Kittle and Gore.
Yeah.
And I love the way you kind of go with like quarterbacks, and there's like a chat, something on Brody, something on Steve Young, something on Alex, something on Cap, something on Purdy. Then you go to the legends, and you go to the coaches and trades, and I just lots of cool different ways to break it down. What was the thought? I mean, who gave you the idea on the book? Where was the idea hatched?
Yeah, so Triumph Books is the publisher, and they approach me. They usually approach me like every year to write some kind of a book, and I'm like, well, look, this team hasn't won the Super Bowl in 30 years. Let's just hold off. And then this year they're like, hey, why don't you do a book on just, this is going to be my 25th year covering the 49ers. And so they're like, give us the historical perspective of the Niners from what you've seen up close and from your interviews over the years. And so there's some stuff from old interviews that were one-on-ones with like the likes of Walsh and Joe and Steve and everybody else. And then there's stuff that was from, as recently as a few months ago when they were on their way to the Super Bowl. But the way I wrote it was it's like there's 40-something chapters. It would have been great, right, if I did 49 chapters, but I wasn't that forward-thinking. But there's like 40-something chapters. And the way I broke it down was, it's the Niners, so you got to start with the quarterbacks. And so what I try to do is, I think I put in about 8 quarterbacks in there. The guys that I've covered or gotten to know are guys that you really need to know about the franchise history and what kind of anecdote or insight that I can offer that maybe you don't know already. Or it was kind of fun going through my archives and just rediscovering some things. Like when Montana was, celebrating the 25th anniversary of him getting drafted, I sat down with Bill Walsh and talked to all these different people just about the whole process and got a hold of Joe. And then Joe's come around the last couple of years, so you can kind of freshen up the story a little bit and, compare him to Mahomes or Brady, whatever you want to do. But it was a fun project. It was a project that I did all throughout last season, Larry, so I was kind of juggling it while I was writing duties on covering the Niners Super Bowl march. And it was more fun to do than I expected. And then the worst part about being a writer is when you have to go back and reread your stuff because you think it's just going to be really boring. And so I was dreading doing final edits, and I'm like, you know what? It's all right. It reads pretty good. So I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I think my line was, if you love the Niners, you're going to love this book. And now it's like, if you don't know the Niners and you're just hopping on the bandwagon these last few years as their Super Bowl contenders, then it's a good way to catch up with some of our younger generation.
A couple anecdotes I got to ask you about. One, I love the Fred Dean anecdotes in the trade, and how Al Davis believed that Bill Walsh saved his coaching career by trading for Fred Dean. And we think of Walsh as one of the monsters of the coaching profession, and he is, and he absolutely is. But it wasn't as set in stone in the early parts of 1981, coming off of 2 bad seasons to start. Talk a little bit about that. The Dean trade, he could have been a Raider, but instead Walsh made that deal, and Al Davis thought it was pivotal.
Yeah, and that's what Al claimed. I had this one-on-one interview with Al, I don't know, what was it, 15 years ago or whatever, and it was awesome. It was like a 3-hour chat, and so there were so many topics covered, and we were probably talking about Walsh, and he would bring up, I could have had Fred Dean. I wanted Fred Dean. The Chargers probably weren't going to trade him for me, but, Bill's lucky he got him because he saved Bill's ass, he's like, I think Walsh at the time was 11-26 as a Niner coach, and it's like, yeah, that's not great. I mean, Shanahan wasn't much better probably. He may have been worse because he started 0-9, but and it's all about how you finish, right? So Bill gets Fred Dean, the dynasty gets going there with Montana Clark and then Ronnie and all these other great players all around them. And so that's why the book allowed me to tap into some stuff that people may not have realized, and that is a good antidote. So you're doing it. You got an A++ on your book report already.
I love it. I'll tell you the other one. I was talking to Brent Jones a couple years ago, and Brent was comparing Brock in some ways to Joe. Now, that's a tough comparison, as we all know, especially a couple years ago. But I thought it was really interesting reading the anecdotes on Steve Young, how Steve Young was totally floored by Joe Montana's preparation and his attention to detail. And it kind of reminded me of what Sam Darnold told us last year when I asked him about it on the podium, about Brock's preparation. There's definitely some connection there between, there's a magic about Brock. I'm not saying he's Joe, I'm not saying that, but he reminds Brent Jones of Joe, and Brent knows both pretty good.
I think part of it is also just his processing skills, and I think Joe was able to just have an uncanny sense of the game, and I think that's what made Joe and Steve who they were, and Brock's got that mental and feel to the game that's showcasing it, and it hasn't been a flash in the pan, and that's why everybody that's watched Brock enough now is a firm believer that this kid is NFL quarterback, and the Niners don't have to worry about the position. Now it's a matter of, making sure Brock stays healthy, and it would be nice to see if number 71 was flying into San Jose Airport tonight, so he shows up at practice tomorrow to protect Brock's blind side. But yeah, everything about the Niners, everything about the NFL revolves around the quarterback, and the 49ers had the NFL rushing champion last year in Christian McCaffrey, and everybody forgets about it.
It's an amazing book. The chapter on the 86 draft class is a fantastic read. Everybody needs to go catch it. Cam Inman with us. He wrote 49ers, A Curated History of the Faithful. It's fantastic. It's out. You guys all need to go buy it on Amazon or wherever you buy books. Awesome stuff. You mentioned Trent. What do you think? When I saw the report today from Fowler saying that Trent is unhappy, what do you think? Is that just something you say, or do you think he's legitimately unhappy?
I think everything we've heard about Trent Williams in the last week is hilarious, because the way that these reports are, it's very semantic based. It's called a contract dispute. The guy is a contract holdout. Of course he's unhappy. If he was happy, he's here. It's a matter of getting him the right number that he wants for a contract and getting him in. I think we saw everything last year with Nick Bosa pushing it to the limit within, a few days of the season opener. And you knew Nick was going to be preparing on his own fine. And that's what Trent's doing. He's been working out in Houston. My whole deal this offseason was just tell me that Trent is not retiring. And he showed up at minicamp. He didn't participate, but he showed up. Sure looked like he wasn't retiring. And from all indications from the Niners and their communications, it's about just contracts. So that's fine. Figure it out. They understand it. There was not panic from the 49er official that I talked to during training camp. They just said, look, Trent's not going to be here during camp. We'll figure it out, and he'll get in. But it's coming up to that time where you need to get him in, because he needs to be game ready come Monday night against the New York Jets. And it's, I will say this, Jalen Moore, he's the backup tackle, so he's going to catch so much flack, for not being perfect. Trent wasn't perfect, but boy, nobody could be much more perfect than him at left tackle. So everybody freaks out about Jalen Moore. What I will say is when we talked to Jalen Moore in the locker room last week, I absolutely loved his confidence. Jalen Moore is the most confident person in Jalen Moore, and that is a huge positive in his favor, because he's been in the league now. This is going to be his fourth year. So he's been in these battles, so he knows what to expect. So if Trent is not there in week one, it's not great, but it could be much worse. And I think regardless, the Niners need to get Trent Williams in.
If he shows up as soon as tomorrow, does he start on Sunday? I know it sounds like a no. He's 36 though. He's 36.
Yeah.
There is risk there.
No, he's got to get in and play. The guy's been in the league. Whether this is going to be a 16th year, so he knows what he's getting into. And Chris Forrester was saying earlier in camp, he's like, look, everybody may think they're in shape as offensive linemen, and then that first drive of the season just exasperates you because you're just not ready for it. So that holds true whether you go through camp or not, Larry. So it's like Trent Williams is an athletic freak of nature, and he is so invaluable to this team that absolutely he's playing. I'd be more curious if Brandon Ayuk snap counts are, maybe in the 60% range rather than the 80% range, or even higher once he gets really going in the regular season, because I assume tomorrow will be his first practice since signing his contract extension, that he will be ready to go. And obviously without Ricky Pearsall available, at least through these first 4 games, and hopefully he makes a speedy recovery, God bless to him, that Brandon Ayuk is, able to participate to the extent that the Niners need him to, along with Debo, and that Juwan Jennings is healthy enough, and then you can mix in some Jacob Cowling and maybe even Chris Conley. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions still going into tomorrow, a lot of personnel questions.
No question. You mentioned Pearsall. I'm going to talk about him probably next segment. I was just so turned off to how many people immediately, before we even knew, how, if Ricky was okay or if if he's still in the hospital, everybody's just digging in deep with their political deals. And I get it. We're going to vote on the president of the United States in a couple months, and people are dug in, and everybody's got their thought. It just seemed to me, it seemed grossly insensitive. Maybe I'm naive, but it seemed grossly insensitive. What do you give me your takeaway quickly on? We only got a minute or two left in the segment, but your thoughts on kind of the reaction to the Pearsall story.
I think that it just depends who you listen to and who was saying that, because it's like, if that's what people's agendas were, that's fine, because maybe they don't know anything about Ricky Pearsall because he hasn't played for the 49ers yet. Maybe it's just something that's been on their minds, and that's fine. People can have their opinions, and there's stats to back up whatever. To me, it's just more of, so Larry, I was down in San Diego, and I was checking into my hotel just like after 4 o'clock last night, and I get all these messages that, something may have happened with Ricky. And I had a really bad case of deja vu, because about 3 years ago I was checking into a hotel in San Diego, and I end up having to write a story about the death of Greg Clark, who is a former 49er, a good friend of mine, and it just gutted me. And so I was just really hoping that Ricky did not sustain a life-threatening injury, and the fact that he got discharged from the hospital yesterday, and the bullet did not hit any vital organs, is what a blessing. That's great. And I just hope everything works out well for him. And it's like, it really puts a lot of things in perspective. And I think this season cannot get here fast enough, the way this offseason has been for the Niners. Just get some games going.
Yeah, no question about it. Cam, good luck with the book. Thanks for stopping by. It's called 49ers, A Curated History of the Faithful, and it's a great read. I would also say this, it's kind of an easy read. It's not a heavy read. It's kind of a fun read, and you can kind of hunt and peck and move around and kind of go, I love how you can navigate that book so easily. So congratulations. I love it. My son loves it, and congratulations with it, man. I'm writing my own book on the Niners a year, that will come out later this year. Different angle altogether, but
is it going to be about the
first book?
Is it going to be about the beat writers?
Yes, it's going to be about who eats the most, who cuts the line in the media lunch sessions.
That's great. Well, hey, Larry, thanks so much for having me on, and congratulations. Everybody enjoy listening to Niners Nightly, and I'm sure it's going to take off. It'll be great.
Thanks, Cam. Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Cam Inman, San Jose Mercury News, and once again, author of 49ers, A Curated History of the Faithful. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the big headlines around the Niners. Ayuk's contract details. Albert Breer had something today on that. Ricky Pearsall, Trent Williams, maybe even my Super Bowl prediction, and maybe a few of your phone calls at 808 KMBR on Niners Nightly on the Sports Leader.